Good evening. Welcome to the RSU5 Board of Directors meeting. It is Wednesday, March 15th, 2023. We are here in the Freeport High School Library. Susanna is on her way. Colin and Beth are not with us this evening, so we will get started in the meantime with the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, so we don't have any minutes for this evening, so we'll move on to adjustments to the agenda.
I have one this evening. We're going to have an item 17, which will be an executive session, and we're going to move the current item 17, which is adjournment, to be item 18.
Okay. Moving right on to good news and recognition, we will throw it to Tegan for the student rep report.
Okay, so for academics, class registration for next year is ending on March 20th. SATs are coming up for juniors next month, April 12th. For athletics, spring sports are starting at the end of the month. And for visual and performing arts, this March there are currently a few exhibitions that are featuring the work of Freeport High School art students at the Portland Museum of Art and the Freeport High School One Act, One Regionals. And for awards or other news, parent-teacher conferences are happening right now at Freeport High School. And lastly, this Friday is another teacher torture day, so students are off.
Okay, thank you. So, yes.
I don't remember what day it is, but is it next week, I think? The One Act is doing an additional performance for those who didn't get to see it in the run-up to the festival. Do you know, Tegan, what day that is? Oh, here it is. Tuesday the 21st at 7 p.m. in the FPAC. I think it's also traditionally a fundraiser because it costs a little bit to get a truck to take it up to states, and it's not usually in the budget. So please come support your drama club.
All right. So next Tuesday, the 21st at the FPAC. Great. Thank you. How far away are states this year?
Ellsworth, which is...
Up there?
No, it's not. Come on, it's not that far. It's a couple hours away. But Ellsworth is a very fierce competitor in One Act, so it's a little tough that we're going up against them.
That's their home field. They get home field advantage. Yeah. Is this one is not student written, right?
Has not been student written
For a couple of years, right?
I think the last one that was student written was Rhea Fitzpatrick in that would have been 2018.
Oh my gosh, was it that long ago?
I think so.
Because this is the Rhea that was on our board.
Yeah.
Wow. Huh. I didn't even
And
know
that
we've had
play-
6 years worth of student reps on the board. That's
And that
fantastic.
play keeps getting performed. In fact, Safley, in her new appointment, is putting on Rhea's play.
That's
Isn't that
awesome.
cool?
Very cool. All right. Well, good luck to them, and hopefully folks can get out next week and support them on the 21st. So we will move on to public comment. We have 2 on the agenda. This is the first. The second is towards the end. So if we have anyone who wanted to share anything, I'm getting a head shake that we don't have any public joining us this evening. So we will move on to report from the superintendent.
All righty. First of all, letter A, retirements, resignations. These are effective at the end of the school year. Alicia DeRoche is the Durham Community School Ed Tech. She will be retiring. Amy Eisenhard, Moore Street School kindergarten teacher, resignation. And then moving on to letter B, which is our FY24 budget update. And you have in your packets, you have some updated handbooks, and I'll point out where there's some changes. We have added some money to Article 1 for a teacher for our multilingual learners. As you know, we have 2 teachers in there presently, and we believe that we will need to have 3 next year. That's a $90,000 cost, but we have some monies that we can leverage through the month of September to pay for some of that. So the cost of the district would actually be $42,000. So Article 1 has gone up by $42,000 In addition, in Article 8, that's our transportation line, we are obligated under the McKinney-Vento law, if there are students who are homeless, that we will partner with the district they live in to provide transportation. And we are partnering with another district transporting students back to Freeport because we are the student of origin this year, and we're leveraging some homeless grant funding that we have for that transportation. But if those students remain homeless after this school year into the next school year, we are still school of origin, and by law they have a right to come back to RSU5. So we're working with a partnering district. We again can leverage some of the money. The grant money we have ends in September. So the cost to RSU5 for the year would be $60,800. After we use the grant money and have partnered, the partnering district is paying for half of that transportation. So that is why you'll see addition to the our ask for on the expenditure side. But on the revenue side, when we're looking at impact to the budget, on the back pages, we looked at what we were billing for CDS. The CDS money we're receiving, that is from the early intervention team. Initially, as we're just having those revenues come in, we anticipated that there would be $10,000 from CDS. But after re-looking at those figures, that we can say safely that instead that would be $50,000 revenue that would support the budget next year. So we increased that revenue on that side. So, and that is on page 12. Right here.
Oh, that fits.
Yeah, that one, yes.
Oh, that's a different one.
That's a different one, yep. And so overall, the new proposed budget that we have before you with adult education is $39,080,000 would be nice, wouldn't it? $39,080,569 dollars, and it is a 4.99% increase in the expenditure side, so we're still below 5%. And then on the back we have the increases to the town. So the increase you see tonight was because of those additions that we've just become aware of that are going to be necessary in our budget. And certainly I can answer any questions that folks have.
Perhaps it might help to maybe just explain the rationale behind the undesignated fund balance amount. How much we're putting towards.
Sure. So we looked at last year. We put the district put. If you look at on page 12 at the bottom, undesignated fund balance, there was $788,671 that the district put towards this year's budget. In addition, you'll see on a few lines up, there was some additional state subsidy that was received, so that also supported, but there's nothing in that line. But this year we've increased it to $900,000. Looking at what we anticipate, our audit is not completely done, but this is what we're anticipating that would be safe that we could put towards the budget, because the goal is to also be fiscally responsible to the taxpayers, and putting that additional money from the undesignated fund balance would help lower what we were asking of the taxpayer. So that's why the additional monies were put before they're looking that we also want to make sure over time that we're not going down too far in our undesignated fund balance in future years.
Okay, so just as a reminder for folks, right now we have 3.4 positions supporting multilingual learners. Yes.
Yes, we have. We had an additional person that was doing some substitute work that is no longer working for us.
Okay.
So right now we have those positions in the budget.
So I'm just trying to think of, in the current budget year we're in, yes, we have 3 in there. We had 2, we added 1 in September.
We did add 1.
Yep.
And right now for next year's budget, there are 2 positions in there, and we're requesting a third because of the numbers.
So essentially we're not increasing we're not increasing the number of multilingual learning teachers. We are keeping it static. We had initially thought we could go down to 2 based on what we were hearing about our students moving out to other districts. But now knowing that they have opted back into Freeport, that's the rationale behind adding that third position down.
Adding that back in.
Okay, thank you. I'm seeing we have 2 budgeted, right? But we're adding a third tonight, right? That makes it to 3.
For this current year, we have 2 budgeted. But we added a position, the board added a position, as Michelle said, yes. To be paid out of the different. Yes.
Right. But there's currently 3 people doing the work. And we're asking for there to be 3 people doing the work next year. Okay, that's what I just wanted to be clear on. Any other questions for Jean on those changes? So the other thing I'll point out to folks is that while it is an increase, I think it speaks to the system that we've put in place for these kids, that they have chosen that they want to be coming here for school, which I think is a testament to the work that's being done in the schools. So thank you to all the folks that are doing that work. And on the bright side, from a revenue standpoint, when they do come here, they count in our student count. So that's a good thing. So that's what drives our subsidy, is student count. So. Jen.
I think, Michelle, just to add to that, because I've seen it in the, with other districts in the news, is that there aren't funds available to schools, from what I understand, to help support the multilingual learners. It's because I'm sure a lot of people are wondering that, and it's not that we're not seeking it out, it's that it's not available.
And I will say there was a small grant for. It was really for homeless students that we received, and those are the funds that we are leveraging right now for transportation, and we'll use towards that in the future. That's allowable. But those monies that we have end September 30th, and we haven't heard of it. I'm looking at my team there. I haven't heard of any other new grant coming forward.
Okay. So I'm just going to point out a couple of things. We have a public input on the budget based on the mad rush for public comment. I'm not sure we'll have a ton of public input tonight, but I would like to let folks know or remind folks that we next week, the 22nd, is our planned adoption. So we'll deliberate and we'll discuss this evening. The goal is to adopt the budget next week, but before we deliberate and adopt the budget next week, there will be another opportunity for public input on the budget. So if folks had thoughts around what we've been discussing over the last couple of months, or questions or anything like that, there is another opportunity for that before the board votes. So just a plug for folks if they want to come out. We'll be right here in Freeport High School Library, 6:30 next week. If folks have any comments or questions on the budget. And then ideally the board will adopt it, which will trigger the printing of the budget brochure that goes out to every household in the district. And then we take the show on the road, so to speak, and we'll have our Q&As first in Pownell on April 12th, then in Durham on April 26th, and then the final one will be here at the high school on May 10th. So those Q&As with the public are from 6 to 6:30, just prior to our 6:30 board meetings. So folks, if they have questions on those, can come and ask those questions. And then on May 24th is the annual budget meeting for the budget, which will be happening at the Durham Community School this year. And then the last day of this whole process, I guess the second to last day, because we do have to accept the vote on the results. But the budget referendum, validation referendum, is on June 13th. So that is what we have left in our budget timeline that started back in September. So There we go. Making progress. All right. So hopefully I've given you guys enough time to think and process and come up with any questions, because I think we're up to board deliberation. I guess I will officially say that if we have public input, I want to pause, make sure there's not anybody. I don't want to take away anybody's ability to speak if they're here and I just don't see them. So, okay. So then I will kick it over to the board for discussion, deliberations, questions, comments. Maura.
Thanks, Michelle. Really just a comment. I want to thank Jean and all our administrators for your hard work on this budget. I think that it's a really great and fiscally responsible budget and balances the needs that we have in our district with our responsibility to the taxpayers. And so I wholeheartedly support this. I did want to just express my continued concern over the SRO position, but I really appreciate that, as always, our administrators are being really thoughtful about that. And so it was really great to hear from them last week, and I appreciated that opportunity. And if there could be student voice as to the SRO role or DEI committee input, I think that would be great. I've talked to a couple of parents and a couple of former students who expressed some concerns to me around the role. So I'll just leave it at that, I guess. But I want to thank everyone for their hard work. And
Maddie.
Yeah, Maura, I appreciated that conversation last week. It was an opportunity for me to look at something differently than I traditionally have, and understand the reasons why my perspective is what it is, and to talk to young people in my life and ask them what their thoughts were, and was a little surprised to hear some differing perspectives than my own. So I thought last week's conversation here, it didn't seem like it's the will of the board to make a grand change at this time, but I think it's a great question to ask, and I would echo the call for student voice on that. And I think, I'm sure Jen Gulko has a lot on her plate with her leadership group, but that group that does where the student leaders go out and they have the conversations with other students, I think that would be a really interesting way for them to get feedback, and I'd be very curious to know what our student body thinks about that, and the presence of police in schools, and if it feels like a good opportunity or something that feels less safe, and for us to consider it further next year.
Okay.
Yeah, I also want to say thank you to Maura for bringing that conversation last week, and thought a little bit about it, and I trust that the benefits of having this position outweigh the potential risks, as long as the SRO is truly building trust-based relationships and trauma-informed in a trauma-informed way as well. And so it makes me wonder, I think this may have come up last week, what kind of training the SRO receives regarding trauma-informed care and DEI education. And I'm also curious about what kind of performance evaluation the SRO receives, and if that is done purely by the chief of police, or if there's input from the administration here. I don't know, Assistant Principal Mellon, if you're able to speak to that at all, if you are part of that process, and if students also have a chance to give some input, like Maddie was saying.
Okay, nice to see you all. Happy March. We do not have any input on the evaluation of the SRO. That comes through the police department, and I don't know who does it at the police department, how they do it at the police department, but we do not evaluate his performance as an SRO at the high school.
Okay, thank you. I wonder if that's something that we could speak to them about, if there are opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that, police officers tend to be unionized, similar to ours, where the evaluation system is kind of identified and put in place. Obviously, this is a slightly different scenario. So, I don't necessarily think it's appropriate for our staff to be evaluating him or her, whoever is in the role. But, it would be interesting to see if, I would kind of think that they would seek out some feedback anyway. But I guess that's their call. Ben.
Back to the budget. Is there a detailed description of cost or expenditures from the previous year and how that aligns with the budget? Is that something?
So it should be this big packet here.
I see it looked as though that was.
It's the actuals, the adopted for this year, and the proposed for next year. So it's got 3 years of actuals, the what we adopted for the current year, and then the proposed for next year.
Thank you.
I was when you and I were chatting about that, I was pretty sure that was the headings for those, but I didn't have it in front of me, so I didn't want to say that until I was able to confirm. So thank you for asking again. Comments? Questions? Jen?
Just to echo what Maura said, I appreciate everyone's hard work on this. I know that, a 4.99 increase does not look minimal, but I think in looking at what other schools are facing, I found an article where another school is looking at a 10% increase. So, not to compare, but I think that I think that they've done a great job on this budget, and I also fully support it. And actually, looking at what we're getting, I think for what we're adding, we're getting a lot for that increase. I'm very excited about the additional social workers and the behavioral position, and I think Craig would probably attest that he's excited about an athletic trainer. So I think all of those things are things that we've talked about for quite a few years, and they've finally come to the forefront. So I think that it's a great budget. Appreciate everyone's work on it.
Laura.
I just also wanted to add, I would be in favor of moving the 10 days for the assistant principal at FMS into the budget. I do want to be sensitive to, any further increases, but the $4,000 for what that would give, I think, to potentially support, Ray and that school in that transition as their current assistant principal goes over to Mass Landing and they get a new one. If that can sort of smooth that transition or help support, the principal and the assistant principal at Freeport Middle School to a greater extent, then I'm all in support of that.
Maddie.
Thanks, Maura. I was actually going to raise that point as well. It seems like a minimal ask, and I'm curious about that role, where we have that role. It looks like the ask for Moore Street is for that assistant principal to come in at that level with those hours, and from what I understand, the current role that assistant principal is working fewer days than teachers are. And that when he comes in the summer, it means those are days that he can't work during the school year. So it seems like we get a lot of bang for our buck there. Not to mention making that position more attractive to hopefully retain the person in the role or attract a new person in the role if it should come to that.
So I guess I'd be interested. Is right here. Oh, man. I guess for me, I would be interested to hear. I think in concept, I think it makes sense to have those additional days in the budget. My question is do we need to do it this year, knowing that there's that transition? Is it even more important to do it this year than not? Or is it, hey, we're generally in support of that, but maybe we don't need to do it this year? With us already looking at a 5% increase, I could be swayed either way. I wish Ray was here to tell us his thoughts on it, but maybe
And I, I don't want to speak for Ray when the sweet spot would be for that, but basically the ask is that there are some summer days, because it's primarily school year, so that's the ask, and I think the board just needs to weigh, is this the year to do it, or is it something that you wait another year to do? It wasn't the top priority for the administrators, for when we prioritize that. Not that it wasn't an ask for sure, but think about that. When's the right time to do that? Just like I think, you gave the example of the athletic trainer, because I know Craig's, I watched the budget presentations last year, and I know Craig was asking for that and tried some other things and then said this was the year to do it. So that's what you'd have to consider when you add it in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely want to hear from Ray on his thoughts on this, but I'm also in favor of moving this in just because of the size of the number. It's a fairly small number, unlike the athletic trainer, which was tenfold this amount. So I think if it would ease the burden on our administration in the middle school, I would be in favor of this year.
Will he be here next week? Yes. Okay. So we don't have to move anything in or out of the budget. I mean, this is just a discussion. So we'll put an asterisk next to that one, and I'm sure you'll give him the heads up to come prepared to answer that question. I will. Other thoughts or questions? I think one of the questions we had in place originally when we talked about the full-time athletic trainer was around oversight and, to your point, evaluation. And I can't remember if we talked about it this year. Did we? Because that was one of the things, the Property and Casualty Trust, they were not big fans of districts having their own medical staff on, other than nurses who have a very specific outlined role and accreditation for. So that was one of my initial concerns around bringing them in-house as opposed to contracting for a full-time athletic trainer last year. Obviously the cost, I guess clearly was too good to be true because we couldn't get someone to do it. But, that was one piece of it. But the other piece was really around, what's the oversight? What's the, how do we manage that? So I guess I'll ask Craig that question, because I do think it's a role that, we've tried a variety of ways that haven't worked, and I think it's put some of the athletes in a not as good position than if we had someone in house. But I just want to make sure that we're prepared to manage the people we bring in.
Yeah, the draft job description that you and I have to get together with said that the position of the athletic trainer reported to the athletic administrator. We talked about adding the school nurse there as someone else that the trainer reports to. In a discussion, I can't remember who it was with, we discussed the school, the school nurse doesn't have a higher medical authority that they're reporting to. They're reporting to the principal or one of the directors. So I think adding, the nurse to that would help. They certainly are going to be communicating and collaborating almost every day.
Yeah.
Are you aware of an increase in that insurance line if we have another medical person?
No, it's not something that specifically differentiates like, oh, if you have one, it's this. If you don't, it's that. It's just something that has come up when they have reviewed the policy in general, going out when they look for, it's insurance, right? They look for where are the risks. That's what insurance is all about. And that's one of the ones that they've identified is having in-house medical staff like that for trainers. So thank you. I feel like you guys have to have more questions. We always have more questions than this about the budget. Maura.
Twist my arm. That makes me, I'm going to look at Maddie. That makes me think about policies now. And now that we have an athletic trainer, so this isn't really related to the budget, but now that we're going to have hopefully an athletic trainer, I'm sure some policies need to maybe be lined up. Like I remember looking at some of our policies in the past that included injuries and sports injuries and how they're handled and all of those kinds of things. Just curious.
Off the top of my notes, and I'm looking at Cynthia and Candy, and we're like, probably, maybe in wellness. I'm not sure. No.
I mean, I think we have like a protocol around concussions and those sort of things, right? Yeah. So I imagine maybe it fits in there somewhere. One of my other questions was around the revenues and the interest income from the revenues. So we had 25 in there for the budget this year. This we're projecting 50 for next year. I feel like that might even be a little low given where interest, savings rates are, et cetera. Were we just being overly conservative there?
I think we were being cautious because we doubled it, but that's certainly something we could look at that would help bring the overall budget down if we bump that up a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I might suggest maybe we look at what we've got year to date, and kind of look at where the steps happened in the bumps in interest rates, and sorry guys, I don't see interest rates dropping materially in the next year. So, which is great when you have money in the bank because you get paid more for it. So, might be something to look at what we've gotten year to date there. And even if we want to sensitize it a little bit, like, hey, this might drop some, I bet it's still more than 50.
We can do that for next time.
Just trying to find little plays.
To know which of these items on here are we're contractually obligated to, and which ones are discretionary, and then who ultimately has the say on what gets spent where. I mean, if a new software is created, is that run through some type of cost control? Is it absolutely necessary? I mean, how is that evaluated? Am I too far in the weeds here?
No, it's a good question. Say your first question again. The contractually obligated. I feel like, I don't know if we have that sheet this year. Usually there was one where we would, where we kind of broke out, this is the total increase and this is how much is due directly to our contracts. I don't know if we did that this year. Did we? I will tell you, it's usually most of it. It's usually like 3 of the 4.5%. I think last year was kind of how those numbers worked. I'm not sure what they are this year.
Yeah. We did. It's 3.95. If you look, the estimated increase in salary and benefits is on. If you look at page 7 at the top, that's the estimate, and that's the figure you always get in that box. Okay. So most of it is.
So that's based on our contracts with the 2 contracts we have with staff.
And that increases 3.9% regardless. Every year that goes up.
No, I mean, well, yes, every year it does go up because of the contract agreement. What the percentage is changes because it's not always the same percent year to year. It depends on where you are in your negotiating cycle. Sometimes negotiations will happen where I've been on negotiating cycles where it's been 2, 2, and 2, and it's the same each year. I've seen it where it's been 3, 2, and 1, right, to sort of spread the impact out depending on what the goals are. So it's not the same amount every year, but
The percentage is pretty fine.
yeah.
Based upon the bargaining.
Correct.
But
Yeah.
that percentage, they would also include people who are not in a collective bargaining agreement. That's all employees that were in there. And if you added any new positions in there, it would be included in it because now you suddenly have new positions increase in salary and benefits for when you look at some of the new positions that we put in, that would be included in that increase. So it's not that everyone's getting it's the overall. That's because of salary and benefits of all employees, including new positions.
Okay, so the additional teacher at Durham, the additional multilingual, those are all picked up in that 395. So that's I guess that's a slightly different answer than the question you asked of, if we just rolled forward exactly who we have today into exactly who we have next year, what's the increase due to the contractual obligation? That's a different question. So we don't know the answer to that. So it's something less than 3.95. But I would say it's probably not materially less than that. I would say it's probably still north of 3 if I had to wager. Our contracts are online. Yeah, they're right on the website. I'll shoot you a link to it so it's easier to find. Yep. Other comments, questions? How are people feeling about? Oh yeah, sorry.
Who has discretion as to what gets purchased? Does it go? Is it circulated through some type of cost control person, or is it just? So
the budget is approved on the article level, right? So you look through the different articles, and so that's how we approve them. How they're spent within there is up to the superintendent and the administrators that oversee those departments. We do have policies in place for large expenditures over a certain dollar amount have to go out to bid, we have to get a variety of contracts or options, RFPs, those sort of things.
What value is that? What is the?
I'm going to say $50,000, but that's my guess. Is it? Maybe it's 25. Yeah. So all of those policies are on the website. Yeah. No, I know. You're asking great questions one weekend. Congratulations. Yeah. So, if there was going to be, here's the thing though. So we have a budget that we've identified these positions, these roles, these programs that we want to offer. And that's really the cap, right? So if there was a big expenditure that they wanted to do, it would have to be in place of something else, right? So usually if something large like that is going to happen, I'm trying to think of an example where we've had it. I'm not sure I can think of one, but, kind of worst case scenario, if there was a major issue with one of the buildings that, we didn't even have enough in our capital reserve, which is, I think, sitting at $500,000 right now, which we could access. If we needed more than that and had to take money from somewhere else, I feel like we, as the board, we would be hearing about that, certainly as the finance committee. The warrants that are signed every 2 weeks by the finance committee is pretty much every check that's written. So, we scan through them. I know for me, I always look for large dollar amounts that don't look familiar, like not ones we see every time. And I'll ask questions of Peggy around what they are and was this budgeted? This is unplanned, something like that. So there is some oversight. So I'm not sure if you have something specific you were thinking about kind of purchase or just in general.
Trying to understand it. Yeah. Because it seems like these are some fairly round numbers. Like we're not seeing exact, of course, because you can't do that on a budget. So I'm wondering where those unrounded numbers end up. Does money go from one cost code to a different cost code within the same article? I mean, is it freely? Can you move it from one to another? Is that
so?
In whose discretion?
Yeah, so they can move within, and I'm going to look to Peggy and Jean here to jump in when I say something completely inaccurate. But so it can move within the article, right? So if for whatever reason, instruction, you needed to move from school to school based on whatever was happening, right? You could move those numbers in Article 1. We vote every year to be able to move up to 5% of any article into another article, right? I'm going to give you an example where that might come into play this year. So facilities and transportation are two separate articles. So we have a mechanic that works on our buses. He's in facilities. He's in transportation. But he is driving a bus, which is also in transportation. So why is this creating an issue again?
Because he's driving a bus and doing work, mechanic
Oh,
work.
right.
Sometimes he can't do all the mechanic work, so sometimes we have to send it out.
So that line item might be over, right? So we can see on here what the budget was for that line item in article. So transportation was 8. So it was $1,438,023, right? So that was what not a round number, you'll notice. That's what we budgeted, but because of the increased cost for some of those repairs that we had to send out to someone else, it might come in higher than that, right? So if there was availability in, say, facilities, we could transfer, as long as it wasn't more than 5% of the facilities budget, we could transfer to cover it, because we need them all to be not negative at the end of the year. So we vote to allow the finance committee to make those transfers at the end of the year to keep it all clean. If there was something in excess of 5%, which I know it's not real wood, but I'll knock on it. That seems like wood. We haven't had that happen in the 10 years I've been on the board. I'm not even sure what that would look like if we had to transfer more than 5%. Do you know? Okay. So the contingency is in there too. Oh, look, Ray's here.
I mean, I'm learning.
Yeah.
So if you guys already all know this, then
It's
with you on the side.
it's a good refresher. We have 120 minutes that we have allocated for this, and no one else has questions but you and Maura. So these are good refreshers for folks.
So contingency. What does that tell you?
So the contingency is 180,000. 177. And so that is we have that baked in each year. The amount varies a little bit. It has over time. And so we put that in case we had to hire another teacher that we hadn't planned on, or we had some kind of need for cash that we was unexplained or unplanned for. And so we put that in there, and we have not touched the contingency in many years. And so what happens is because, we put 177 into the budget, we don't spend any of it. It all flows into that unexpended fund balance or undesignated fund balance. And then we use that plus some additional funds that rolled into that undesignated fund balance and use it to offset the future taxes, right? So if you went back 7 years or 8 years on these booklets, in the revenue section, you would see it would say contingency, $177,000 of revenue. Okay. It's not really revenue. It basically just means we're moving it from, we didn't use it last year, so we're going to roll it forward and not collect it again this year. So we collected it in the first year, but have sort of rolled it forward going forward, so we don't have to keep collecting it each year because we haven't used it.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
You.
You good, Maddie? Okay. Hey, Ray, I have a question for you.
Nothing like trying to sneak into a meeting.
Yeah. So we were talking about the budget, big surprise, and one of the things that came up was the interest from some of the board around adding the 10 summer days for the assistant principal. So it's in the third priority tier, which means it wasn't included. I think the thought was it's not a huge ask. If it would really help the transition with whoever that new person is this summer, the board might be willing to move it in now. My question was, do we need it this year, knowing what I'm supportive going forward of making sure they have those days, because I do think it makes sense to have the assistant principal in school when the kids are there and have those days in the summer. But I just wasn't sure if we needed it this year, knowing what's happening with that role with Connor going to Mass Landing.
Well, I mean, we don't know exactly what's happening with that role yet, with how we'll fill that, whether it'll be one person throughout or it'll be two different and different times. We do have that flexibility. I didn't want to lock us in one way or the other. I do agree with you that, having that person have some summer days. I appreciate, that, and I do think there's an importance to that. And I also agree with where it fell on the priority list as well. The social workers and the other things we're asking for, definitely, more important to the success of our district. But I do think it's an important part to have the assistant principal part of the summer and to be in school. Your exact question's a little hard to answer without knowing how we're staffing it yet. If we staff it, with the same person coming through and it's a person that is familiar with the RSU, absolutely makes sense, and I'd want them to be part of it. If we're staffing it with two different people or we're staffing it for someone from outside coming in, it's more work for me to have them there. I'd rather, get it up and running myself. So I guess it really depends on what way we end up going, which I wish I could just say, yes, it absolutely is going to make the difference and I want it now. But the reality is it depends on how we hire.
Okay. Thank you. Jen?
Because it is kind of a small amount, is there any way to reshape could we put it somewhere, or could it come from somewhere if Ray says that it's really important? I know you just gave a whole explanation about how things move in articles, but, just so it's sort of, sorry. But just so it could potentially be available, because I appreciate what Ray's saying about kind of not knowing, but we all know that sometimes having someone extra is 10 times the work than not having them. So is there any way to do that with that small amount? Is there any creative kind of thought on that?
Yeah, I am sure that if there was a need to bring a new person in or bring someone in over the summer for a few days, that they could find those funds to do that. Yeah. Is that fair to say?
Is that the sort of thing you can use contingency for?
You could. I would say you wouldn't even need to.
And it's in the wrong article. So it's it was in the wrong article. Right. So it's, I think, is it doable? Possible. I always say if we're going to use it, I'd rather have it in the budget than not in the budget, because it makes it cleaner and easier for that, if that's the case. But we could work and see. It really all depends with that particular article.
But moving forward, there was a reason why it was at ask, and there was a reason why it was put where it was on the list.
Okay. Thank you. Maddie?
I'm all for creative financing, but just what I said earlier about, equity for the role, what the role is, and retaining that position and hiring for that position. I think it's important that if we're going to do it, we should do it right.
But the person who's going to be in that position is not going to be the beneficiary of these 10 days, right? Going forward.
But
right. So by the time they would be, presumably the following year, then I think this is one we would see back, would be my expectation, by the time we needed it. Other questions, comments? Are we really going to get out of here at 7:15? I guess we have a few more things on the. Yeah, we do have a few more.
So
things
could I
on
ask my questions? Just I want to make sure I follow my to-do list. My to-do list. One thing, Peggy and I are going to look at the interest date to see if we can bump up that interest. But my question is, am I putting the assistant at this time, those extra hours in, or am I not, to rerun the financials? I just need what the will of the board is on that.
I agree with Maddie that it's important. I do think if we could do something this year based on the fact that we don't know who the person is, and I think it's, hopefully clear to Ray, if he really needs something, he'll ask for it, and then have it be put in the budget for next year. Only because there, part of it is just keeping that below 5. Honestly, I know that it's a small thing, but keeping that increase below 5, I think, is important, even if it's 1/10 of a.
There's a reason cars are always $999.99, right, John? Okay, so straw poll, because we love these. who would be in favor of adding the 4,000 at this point for this year? 4. Who would be in favor of leaving it the way it is and revisiting it next year? Yeah, I mean, yeah, it sounds like it really, the answer, as it often is it depends. So hold off till next year. Raise your hand again. Just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So that's a hold it for now. Leave it the way it is for now. Thank you guys. And just for Ben's benefit, straw polls, not official. We're just trying to get a sense of how the board's leaning, feeling.
So for the budget, does the budget have to be unanimous?
No. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. It just has to be a consensus, so the majority. Yeah. All right. Other, was that all you needed for? That's all I need. That's all you needed for you. Okay. You guys ready to move on from budget? Admin's doing a little happy dance out there. All right, so we are back to public comment. Nope. All right, then could I have a motion for consideration and approval to enter into executive session as outlined in 1 MRSA section 4056A to discuss a personnel issue? Susanna and Kara, thank you. All those in favor? Great, not opposed. So we'll take a quick break. They'll shut down the camera, clear the gallery, and then we'll reconvene.